So you said you were drinking coffee.
Yeah, I've just finished my coffee. So that's coffee done for the session.
Nice.
Then we won't have any noise when I put it down like we did last week.
No, I didn't even hear it. So I've got a nice big pot, and I've gone for a. Ollie is having a go over there.
Ollie.
I've gone for a rooibos chai today.
Ooh, I love rooibos and I love chai.
So did you know rooibos is a South African?
I did, but I didn't know that until I think like a few months ago.
Not from me. But I didn't
No, not from you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really good. And so I put some honey in it. So I just wasn't feeling a black tea today in my Make Our Future Golden cup.
Ah, well, may our futures be golden.
100%.
I trust that they will.
They definitely will.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome to Understory Learning. We are a nature-based podcast, and we are going to be talking about our adventures as we explore the natural world. And we would like to invite you along with us. We will be having an understory of the week a little bit later, so join us for that. And also we will be inviting you to take part in our journey as well. If you have any stories that you would like to share with us, we really want to hear them. So please do get in touch. Today, we are going to talk about pines and pests. We talked about conifers and critters last week. We talked a little bit about the conifers that we know of and the critters that live on and around them. And one of those we didn't go into detail with, and that was the pests that you can have around pines.
And boy, oh boy, there are a lot.
There are a lot of pests. We've been looking into them, and it's been quite hard to choose a handful. But before we begin, Caitlin, I've got a thought of the day for you.
You do?
Yes,
Please,
and it is a quote by an ecologist and poet, Gary Snyder. What do you think to the idea that nature is not a place that you visit, but it is home?
Oh, that's such a beautiful thought. I find I've been going and visiting a lot of nature recently, but it's just the way that you frame it, isn't it? I think the fact that that is home, and that we're coming back to it, just, I don't know, that kind of gives me a little bit of joy, a little bit of happiness.
Yeah, it's cute, isn't it?
Idea. I do. I love that. It's very cute.
I don't know if you've experienced this, probably, but I've noticed that whenever I go somewhere, leave, and then come back to it, if it's a place that I feel, I think, a little bit of love towards, I remember the smell, and then it tends to be the smell of the trees and the smell of the nature around, and it hits you with that nostalgia or that feeling of comfort. And that's what that makes me think of. It's the nature's all around us, and it doesn't matter where we go, it's still there, but it's slightly different. And so home has got a distinct feeling to it, distinct smell, and it's because of the nature, isn't it?
It is because of the nature. And I think thinking about those smells, for me, those always come around like after the rains. Then I just I don't know, I think it just moves everything so that it kind of comes to the forefront as you're walking through the forest, as you're walking through the park or the space that you're in.
That's such a good point. There is that smell after it's rained, and before it rains too.
Yes, that pre-rain, you can tell that it's coming.
Yeah, I love that smell.
I do love that smell.
I love that.
Yeah.
Gosh, it's very sensory, isn't it? I love sensory things.
You do.
What a beautiful thought. Well, we can continue thinking about that as we go about our day.
Definitely. And I suppose leading into our topic for today is nature is home to so many creatures and critters and
yeah, it is.
Those that are welcome to us and unwelcome as well, whether we like it or not. Whether you like it or not, they're there.
Well, thinking about welcome and unwelcome, I think the welcome, a lot of it is the native creatures and the native plants. And then the unwelcome, from what I've read, tends to be the invasive plants and creatures that have been introduced, and it's not necessarily their fault that they're invasive. It's more about the fact that they thrive. It's like they love living there. In fact, interesting fact, and it does lead into pines and pests, but it's not one of the pests that I researched. I just found this information by chance. So in the UK, we have a lot of rabbits. a lot of wild rabbits. And I learned this yesterday, actually. I didn't know that the rabbit is not native to the UK. I had just
Really?
assumed, yeah, it's not. And I assumed it was because I've grown up seeing them. They're such a normal part of the landscape. But they were introduced, I think, shortly after the Norman conquest, around, so that was 1066.
Okay.
And so shortly after that, rabbits were introduced. Can't remember why.
Because they're
Oh no, I
cute
do
and
remember why.
fluffy.
Yeah, it is to do with how fluffy they are because their fur was valuable, so they thought we'll introduce rabbits, and I think they tried to keep them um, domesticated so that then they could use them, but then naturally some escaped. And then before you knew it, the country is overrun by rabbits. The landscape is overrun because at this point there was no equilibrium between predator and prey. So they hadn't got their natural place in the food chain
Chain.
yet. And so they completely changed the landscape. And prior to rabbits, we had loads of natural pines and other natural conifers. There was a lot of those in the landscape, but because the rabbits they were like eating them. I suppose they must have been eating the sapling like growth and stuff. And then a lot of our pine forest disappeared because of rabbits. Yeah. But now they've found
Oh,
predators and now the foxes and stuff keep them under control, which is very good. Because
that
now
is
they can
good.
live here in harmony.
Oh my word. Okay, that's so interesting. Thank you for sharing that with us.
You're welcome.
Wow. I suppose in their own way they would be called they fit into this pines and pests topic, don't they?
Yeah,
Right? Because they
they
were a
do.
pest to the
They do.
pines.
Yes, to the pines. But now I think we've learned to live with them, and I think they've learned to live
Mm,
here, and they really do thrive.
they
So
really do. They do. I think also going back to the unwanted animals or insects, I often also think about unwanted in the sense of like we're scared of them or we don't really like them or they give us the heebie jeebies. So, like for a lot of people, snakes would be unwanted, but they're really important in the
yeah,
environment.
that's
Spiders as
true.
well. And
Wasps as
so
well.
yeah, wasps too. And so, actually, what I learned through a lot of my research, which was really interesting, is that often the spiders and the presence of spiders in pine forests or conifer forests is so important because it helps to keep those pests at bay or at least under
Mm,
control. So, that's one of the management tools that is used to assist with pests in pine forests.
yeah, that's true. And also I think it's important to remember and it's easy to forget, isn't it, that things don't just have a bad side or a good side. They've got both. Everything has both. And in a lot of these pests that I've been looking at, I expected to see just a load of villains.
Yeah.
They are villains in some lights, but then they're also heroes in their own way. Like you've the side that all the media kind of gets hold of, the bad news, maybe our negative connotations with them because let's say a wasp for example, we might have been stung by a wasp. They're quite annoying when you're trying to eat a jam sandwich and they're buzzing around your face,
Yeah.
um,
They
and they
sting
just get on
multiple
your food.
times.
They sting multiple times, exactly. They're not afraid of stinging you,
Yeah.
and they build nests in annoying places that then you have to try and get rid of. Or
Yeah.
like we last
Pause.
year we had a situation where they were in our barbecue and we decided we didn't want to get rid of them, so we just didn't barbecue all summer. We just left them there. So we couldn't have a barbecue. But that's I think that's because
What a
we're
tragedy. As a South
yeah, I
African
know.
as well, not being able to have a braai, a barbecue, that is a
Yeah, it
nightmare.
was a sacrifice, but we thought we'll sacrifice it for the wasps because there's another side to them that a lot
Yep.
of people don't see, and they're amazing pollinators,
They are
but also
amazing pollinators.
pest control. Like
Mhm.
they're predators to things that we don't want getting too much of that population. So, yeah, there's a plus and a
There's
negative to them
oh
all, and it's about
everything.
seeing all of it.
Definitely. Just like the weeds, like we've spoken about, right? How they've got good qualities too.
That's
So
it.
it's about trying to find those, and sometimes it's harder to find. I was specifically looking for those positive sides with the pests that I researched. It was really hard to find, and I think a lot of that has got to do with where they are. I'm looking at them in South Africa and whatever. They don't have necessarily a positive quality because that's not
Yeah,
their native home. So finding
yeah.
those positives can be really difficult.
It is difficult, and a lot of the research that has been done has perhaps been commissioned by like a forest that, let's take, for example, the bark beetle. I'm going to talk a little bit about those. But a lot of the research done on those has been done by people who are going to benefit from not having them, pest control companies and stuff like that. So the whole focus of their research is on what harm they're doing and how to get rid of them. Then it doesn't benefit them to also look into how they're helpful and how like maybe they're not as bad as you think. They do cause a lot of harm. I'm not saying that at all.
No, they
But
do,
again,
especially if they're not in their native homes, right?
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Their
A lot of it
environment that
does
they're
come back
supposed to be
to
in.
the environment they're in. Hopefully, we can do these insects a little bit of justice with how they're not necessarily as bad as we think. That they definitely are in some cases, but they have another side to them.
Hopefully. Well, I would love to hear more about the bark beetle, Hattie. So why don't you go ahead and tell us about
Okay.
that?
So, the bark beetle. There are loads of different kinds of bark beetle, and essentially what they are is a little tiny little beetle. They all look very, very similar. It's quite hard to tell them apart. They're brown and kind of pill shaped. And what makes them a bark beetle, there's probably more scientific reasons than this. They bore or tunnel into the bark and lay their eggs inside the bark of the tree, and then those eggs will hatch, and then the larvae will eat away at the tree, eventually emerging from the tree, and they will pupate and then continue the cycle. But with
Yeah.
a lot of these pests, there's multiple generations of the of the insect. So the first generation will cause a little bit of harm, and
Yeah.
then over winter, well, they'll emerge in the spring and they're already established in the tree, and they will continue that harm. And that's it tends to be like that second generation that then causes the most of the problems.
Yeah.
But with the bark beetle specifically, I had so much fun looking at these because the tunnel patterns that they make, I think, are so beautiful. And each type of bark beetle has a unique tunnel pattern. So let's take the mountain pine beetle, for example. It's got like a long tunnel that the mother has made, and then coming off it in like random sticks at right angles to this main tunnel are the lava tunnels, and they create this beautiful, beautiful pattern that I think looks like a tree if you were to
Oh, so
it
interesting.
kind of on its side. Yeah, really cool. And then the southern pine beetle, which is another pine beetle that I looked at, it doesn't follow that same thing at all. It has all these S's that overlap and little dots where they've bored into, and it's so pretty. It's like they've created a map.
Yes.
Just so beautiful. And I was trying to draw some of these patterns, and I had so much fun drawing them. But with the beetles, so not a pine beetle, but another type of bark beetle. I think it's the European elm bark beetle or something. That is known for spreading Dutch elm disease. And I thought it was really interesting to notice that this bark beetle is invasive because it's been introduced
Yeah. Do you know
and
where it was
it
introduced
thrives.
from?
This elm bark beetle so it's European of
Okay.
origin, and it was introduced to North America. The actual bark beetle itself doesn't do much damage to the tree. It's a problem because if it's got these patterns in it, it's not going to be any good for timber and stuff anymore. So there's that side thing, especially with the pine ones, right? In terms of elm trees, there is a really invasive disease called Dutch elm disease, and it's threatening a lot of elm trees. And these beetles are known for passing it on. But it's not actually the beetle itself that's the problem, it's the pathogen that they're passing. And this pathogen was also introduced and is invasive. So without that pathogen, the beetles would probably be not causing as much of an issue.
Yes.
Because that pathogen is now in North America,
Right.
obviously elms are not coniferous, and that is just it's just an example that I thought was
Yeah.
quite useful for explaining how
Yes.
they're not necessarily the main cause of the problem, these bark beetles, but there's a secondary thing. So with the mountain pine beetle, they have a lot of natural predators, and so there is quite a natural kind of control over these. But if there is an outbreak, let's say a particularly large infestation on a plantation or a particular tree, then those predators are not there's not enough of them to control that population. And the thing that causes those outbreaks is the environment changing. So we know that the climate is changing, at least, so it's got more extremities of cold, more extremities of hot. And these mountain pine beetles, they thrive in a mild winter and a hot, dry summer, which is becoming increasingly common in the parts of the world where they are native to. So these mountain pine beetles are native to Western North America, but they're spreading further east because their climate is more suited to them, or is becoming better suited to them than it did before. In this well-suited climate, especially if it's drier, especially if it's milder through the winter, because the winter controls the population, then they actually thrive, and then you have these infestations, which again, not necessarily the beetle's fault. You can't necessarily put the beetle as the villain here, because they're just doing their thing, and changes to the climate, changes to the environment are actually what's driving them to actually thrive even better.
Yeah. And to migrate, to move, because I found a lot of that
Exactly.
with mine. And a lot of the time, for example, I looked at the black turpentine beetle is
Okay.
also a borer in terms of the fact that it bores into tunnels into the tree. And so they're native to the eastern part of the USA.
Right.
As the
Okay.
climate's changing, they're moving further and further west, which is then creating issues in those areas because they don't necessarily have the natural predators that are in the east that can keep
Right.
them
Okay.
under control.
So it's the
So
same, but like, it's almost like these two are crossing
yes,
routes.
exactly. So no, that I think a big part of, because the thing is these animals, what, they've been around for hundreds of years, and so they've adapted and learned how to live in certain environments, and other animals have adapted and become their predators, and so there's this very subtle balance, if I can put it like that,
Hmm.
and we're kind of coming in and messing that all about.
Yeah. Yeah, we are. Yeah, exactly.
So they're not the villains here, I feel like. I think a big part of it is us, and we villainize them because they ruin our trees, or now we can't use that bark for furniture or whatever.
So, one of the insects that I researched was called the pine shoot moth.
Mm-hmm.
And this moth, it caused a federal quarantine in the US, where basically they prohibited the import of trees from Europe to North America. This was in 1915, and it was because of this pine shoot moth and how much of a impact it was having on these trees. It
Mm-hmm.
took me quite a while to find more information on this because an article mentioned it, and then I couldn't find anything anywhere. And then I eventually found this old article from 1932 or something
Wow.
that was
Okay.
talking about how this pine shoot moth had been so problematic, and it was invasive, and it was causing a lot of problems. And they realized that it had come across from the European pines that they were importing. Now, it's not prohibited still, but the regulations are really, really strict. So if people are trying to import pines across to the US, the regulations, as they should be, are really, really strict. And it's all because of this pine shoot moth. This pine shoot moth is beautiful. It's got like a fiery orange color, and it's got like a white fringe around the outside of its wings.
Ooh.
It's really gorgeous, but it's quite problematic. So what it does is it lays its eggs on these pine needles. I think they're quite flat eggs, and then the larvae bore into the needles
Okay.
and then into the shoot. They can completely deform and stunt the growth of entire shoots and
Wow.
buds on this tree. So if they're stunting the growth of this tree, it's not going to grow to the level that you need for it to be able to give you the timber that you want, the whole point of it being in this plantation. So they can destroy complete plantations. They don't kill the trees necessarily. I
Like
expect
by
they probably
killing the
could if
shoot.
there was enough of an attack. And like you think about the multi-generational attacks, one after the other, it's going to weaken the tree. But the foliage starts to turn brown, which again, if the foliage is not bringing in the energy that it needs, like
If it's
those
not
needles aren't doing their
photosynthesizing.
job,
Yeah.
then the tree's weakening. So there's all kinds of these indirect ways that they're damaging the tree as well. And so they can have a real big impact.
Yeah.
However, I did, as we've talked about, look at the positive side of them, because it's not their fault that they were introduced by us bringing it across the world. They're also moths, which are nocturnal pollinators. And
Which is okay.
arguably, moths are better pollinators than things like your bees and your daytime pollinators. And they're also a very good food source for your wasps and your birds. So, and also bats eat a lot of moths.
Yes.
Find anything to see if they eat this kind of moth, but that's something to bear in mind is all of these insects that are causing problems, they're also good food.
That's so interesting.
So, Caitlin, tell me about one of yours.
So what I also looked into a moth, and this is the pine processionary moth. And the name makes a lot more sense in their caterpillar state. They are seriously destructive because they eat the needles of the pine trees. Originally, they are from the Mediterranean areas like Southern Europe and the Middle East and North Africa. But they affect trees in Asia and throughout Africa. And currently, from the research that I saw, they're not yet in the UK. But it is a massive worry that they will eventually make their way to the UK.
Right, right.
The moth themselves, they've got more of a creamy coloring to them. They do have brown markings as well. In their adult stage, they mate and lay eggs in the late summer. And the female can lay between 70 to 300 eggs.
Wow, that's a lot of eggs.
Insane. Also quite a range. The eggs are laid on the needles specifically. And then they hatch during the autumn. So during the autumn, after about 30 to 45 days, so give it like a month and a half, they hatch and start to eat these pine needles. And then through the winter, and this is probably the easiest way to spot them, in the winter, the caterpillars make these tent-like nests. So basically, if you think of like a spider that's gone absolutely crazy with spider webbing and like pulled pine needles together, and it's just this big fluffy nest in the tree, during the winter, that's where these caterpillars stay. Then in the early spring, these caterpillars, which are very hairy, they are like a rusty orange color with some black dots and black stripes on them as well. They form a procession and they go down the tree and they walk for a little bit, and then on the ground they pupate in the soil. And so
Wow.
that them walking in this procession, that's where they get their names from.
Yeah, I imagine that's so interesting.
I read a blog and it was a really funny title because it was like, why did the caterpillars cross the road? I just thought that was really funny. So basically they leave their tree in the spring, create a little procession, walk, and then pupate in the soil. And then
Wow.
come late summer, they all just do it again. So their biggest impact is on the pine needles themselves. Also in caterpillar form, really, really dangerous to humans because their little hairs, like most, pretty sure all caterpillars that are hairy are scary. I always just think hairy is scary, no touchy. Like we just stay away from
I
them.
like that motto.
So they've got, at the end of their little hairs, they've got like this little hook. And through that, if you touch them or anything, they can cause irritation, rashes, pain, and then possibly in very rare cases, also you can have an allergic reaction.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
so a lot of the
Are they
research
the
that I
ones that can cause respiratory problems too? I
not
don't know if it was them. I was reading
no
something about a type of moth that the hairs are really you can inhale the hairs. They can cause respiratory issues, but it might not have been them. But it's
you
quite
say
crazy.
that, and I remember writing something down about that. Maybe that's how I just read it. And I
Mm.
think you're right. Their hairs can get blown in the wind, and then yes, if you breathe them in, they can cause problems in the respiratory.
Quite a
Um,
scary idea, isn't it? Don't want to be anywhere near those.
Completely. And so a lot of the research, like around the research, they'd always talk about management strategies. And the number one thing is to teach your kids not to touch these caterpillars at all. And you as an adult shouldn't touch them either unless you've got the correct kits on or that you've got protective gear on because they're just really dangerous.
Yeah. Gosh.
So that was really interesting as well.
Well, with a lot of the things that I found, by pruning the trees,
Mm,
sometimes you can pick them off individually to get them off the tree. You can prune the shoots
yeah.
that they're on, but I imagine that's not really an option with these.
No, you'd have to be very careful. You'd have to call in somebody who is an expert and knows what they're
Yeah,
doing. That was an interesting one. The name didn't make sense to me until I got to the information about the caterpillars, and I was like,
yeah,
aha, this is why
makes
they're
sense.
called this. Yeah.
Nature is so cool.
It is. It really is. And yeah. How do they know? How do they
Yeah, and
know who to follow? And how does that first caterpillar know where it's going?
yeah, it's like when you see a V of geese in the sky, and you're
Yes.
like, which one is the leader, and who decided that?
Yeah. How did you get that job? And what did you have to put on your CV in order to get that job?
Exactly, exactly. What qualifications do you have, sir?
So I think there was actually a research paper done regarding these pine processionary moths. I'm trying to remember what the details are of it, but it was done using the fact that they create a procession, and theologists and psychologists, I think, were trying to use it as a way to kind of say, okay, well, it doesn't matter what you are, who you are, what animal you are. We innately all have this like follower, like DNA almost within
Interesting.
us, that no matter what you are, you choose to follow the leader.
I suppose it comes from a safety perspective, right? And a survival
Probably.
thing. Yeah, that is interesting. And it's interesting that all of these, so like we've both researched moths, and they behave in a similar way in terms of attacking the tree, like they attack the shoots and the foliage, and then they behave in such different ways otherwise. Like
Yeah,
your processionary moths, they all travel down the tree and they pupate in the soil. I wonder how they got there, as opposed to the
yeah.
pine shoot
Yours.
moth, which also creates the tent that you were explaining, to the point
Okay.
that I was like, maybe it's just the same thing but different names. No, because these, I think they pupate inside,
In the
bore, because
bark.
they bore into the shoots.
Mm.
And so they pupate inside. It's really interesting.
No, it is
How
really
they look so
interesting.
similar, but they've got this one thing that is so different about them. How do they evolve to have that kind of difference when obviously both work?
Completely. And I think, what was the other one that I researched? Yeah, it was my black turpentine beetle that we were talking about earlier. And you were talking about the boring. And so here the female bores like straight in and then down. And she goes down underground where the male
Oh,
then
through
meets
the
her.
tree.
Yeah, she
Wow.
bores all the way down, making like a upside down L. And then the male meets her below ground. So they do start boring towards the bottom of the tree. So it's not like they're at the very top and have to go all the way through the tree, but they bore down to below ground level. And that's where she meets a male and the mate, and she lays her eggs under the ground in that little like chamber that she makes for herself. And then, just like you mentioned earlier, it's like they all kind of just spread out and
Yeah, yeah.
create like this, yeah, almost like tree from the bottom. It's really
It's like a
interesting.
whole world that they
It
create, isn't
is.
it? Like
It
you just look
is.
at a tree and you don't think that actually inside that tree and beneath that tree, there's so much life that's not tree.
Yeah.
Bugs or it's birds, like the birds that roost inside trees. I always think it really interesting when, when you're walking along in the woods and then you see a tree that's got a big hole in it. And I always think, who lives in there? What's their house like?
Exactly. I'm the same. And then, yeah, just different insects and animals using all different parts of the tree. So I researched a black pine aphid as well.
Oh, I didn't look at any
Um,
aphids.
okay, so now usually when I think about aphids, I think about them attacking my mom's roses, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they are also a sap suckling insect. They're native to North America and they were first discovered in South Africa in 1974. And trees that are heavily infested by them can be recognized by this black appearance that the tree gets, because what happens is as they suck the sap, they create honeydew, which a sooty mold grows on. And that's where this
Okay.
black color comes from,
Okay.
which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. And aphids, I think that's what they do, isn't it? In general, is they create honeydew, and then they
Yes.
have all these relationships with other things like fungi and
Hmm.
ants and things. There's a type
Yeah.
of ant
They kind of
that
keep them as
completely
their
controls.
pets.
Yeah, isn't that
Yeah.
so interesting? It's like this, it's almost like a toxic relationship, how these ants, they hold these aphids hostage so they can get as much honeydew from them as possible, and then they'll
Yeah.
desert them.
Yeah. No, it's crazy. What an interesting world.
I know, it's amazing. It's everything is like, it's like a cog, and they're just in one giant system that without one of those cogs, like the rest of it doesn't work quite so efficiently. And it's all linked, and it's so you can't see the links on a surface level until we start looking into it like we are now, and we start to see the relationships. It's really
You take
cool.
one piece away, right? And then everything else starts derailing.
Yeah, no matter how tiny that piece is.
Yeah,
Or
completely.
you introduce a new piece and it starts to cause chaos, like the rabbits. So another one of the pests that I had to look at was a sawfly. Now, a sawfly looks a little bit like a wasp, and I think a few things that I read suggested that they're related to wasps, and it would check out because they're excellent pollinators,
Mm-hmm.
and they're also good pest control. So those are its two kind of jobs, I suppose. And they're not necessarily an invasive species, but they can cause damage to some conifers. So there's loads and loads of types of sawflies. I think there's like 4,000 or something species or more. Yeah, there's loads, and they have all these subfamilies, and then the subfamilies have subfamilies, and it's you could build a whole family tree from these conifer sawflies, from just sawflies in general.
Yeah.
But the one that I particularly looked at were conifer sawflies for obvious reasons, because we're talking about conifers and pines at the moment. And if we think about how sawflies look, so wasps have that waist, don't they? They have that
Yes.
waist that kind of separates their body into two main sections, or maybe three main sections if you think about their head.
Yes.
Anyway,
Yeah.
the conifer sawflies, they don't have this. In fact, sawflies in general don't have this waist. They're just like two sections straight down, and they do look so different, all of them, and their antennae are quite expressive. So I think the conifer sawflies, they have like these fluffy kind of antennae that come out here, but other than that they just look very standard, almost like a fly.
Are they about the same size as horseflies?
I think they might be a bit small. They're about 3.2 millimeters long, so they are quite small. So they're most common in North America, Europe, and Asia, but they have also been found in, and I'm not sure if they're invasive or introduced here, but they've also been found in North Africa and Central Asia and a bit of Southeast Asia. But I think they've also more recently found them um, in India and
Ah, okay.
Nepal and places like that. They're called sawflies because the females have like a saw on their tail. I mean, it's not tail, but
Yeah, on
you know where I
the
mean.
tail
So it's like
end.
a saw. Yeah, exactly. And that saw cuts into the pine needle and they lay their eggs inside the pine needle.
Oh,
So it's very,
interesting.
yeah, it's very intricate business here. And then the larvae hatch and they start to eat on those pine needles. Once they've eaten the pine needle, they go on to the shoot, and they start off like when they're very, very young. All these eggs are on the same pine needle, right? So they
Mm-hmm.
hatch on the same pine needle. And so the same pine needle is eaten by all these larvae, and you see like a clump of, they
Okay.
look like caterpillars, but they're a little bit different to caterpillars in the fact that they've got more legs, if they can be called legs. They're kind of just like stumps, aren't they? Like fleshy stumps, but I think they've got a special name, prolegs. So, and they all clump together on the same pine needle, and then as they get bigger, they separate to the different pine needles, and then you can see there that this spread is getting more and more, and they will feed on the foliage and cause the tree to obviously be a bit weaker, because anything that's feeding on the foliage is weakening the tree. And then again, they'll lay the more eggs and they'll have multiple generations, and it is this multiple generation thing that causes the issues, because the first lot, they're not going to cause loads of damage, but
Yeah.
then they lay on the same tree, and then before the trees manage to recover, then they're having even more damage, and it can be like in one year they can have like two generations.
Wow.
um,
Okay.
so they've not even gone through a full cycle of renewing their needles. And then they can create outbreaks and they can damage, like I think the smaller trees they tend to go for,
Okay.
but they wouldn't necessarily kill the tree um, unless there's like extensive exfoliation, which would be in a bigger infestation. They're not a huge risk, but they are still causing problems, and they are obviously a bit of an issue when it comes to these
Mm-hmm.
plantations. But again, they have loads of natural predators. So these natural predators do tend to keep the populations down, and it would be in those bigger outbreaks that then they would struggle, which I
Okay.
think happen
Yeah.
from time to time. But in general, these sawflies, they're not too much of a big problem.
I'm also wondering if you've got a sawfly infestation and that's slightly weakened the tree, but then something else comes along that
Hmm.
and the tree's already weakened, then that might cause bigger problems. So it's not necessarily that they
Yeah.
themselves cause big problems, but they start weakening the tree already.
Exactly. I think in general that tends to be the trend, doesn't it? It's the
Mm,
initial pest isn't necessarily the main problem. It's what they introduce to the tree, like the fungi or
yes.
the pathogens or the bacteria or whatever it is. And then they create an issue in the tree because they've weakened it and they've almost opened a portal to something else to come in, which then it looks like they're the direct issue, but they're not necessarily.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah. Do you have any more?
I do. So I saw the picture of this wood wasp and I said, okay, that's it. I have to cover this. This is
Wood wasps are so
gorgeous.
cool.
So cool. So this, and I'm hoping I'm going to say the name correctly, is the Sirex Noctilio, but it
Okay.
also is called the midnight wood wasp, the European wood wasp, the European horntail wood wasp, or the Sirex wood wasp.
Wow. The
We love
midnight
a
wood
wasp.
wasp is my favorite
Yeah,
name. I love that.
definitely. We love a wasp that goes by many different names.
Yeah.
So they are native to Europe, Asia, and North Africa, and they attack a variety of different pine trees. So this isn't specific to like a black pine or a European pine. Like they'll just go for anything that they can. And the big issue that they have is that the females, when they lay their eggs, they do so with a mucoidal substance. It's just a very fancy way of saying a mucus. Okay.
Right. Right.
So I
Okay.
was like, what's that? And I researched it. I'm like, oh, so it's just mucus. Okay, cool. So they've got this mucus, and that's what's toxic to the trees. So
Okay.
they were originally found in South Africa in 1994, and they are heavily invasive. They've also got a mutualistic symbiotic relationship with a species of crust fungus, and that also causes
Okay.
problem for the trees. So not only are they weakening the trees through their toxic mucus, but then they're also harming the tree with this crust fungus that they have a mutualistic relationship with. What happens is the wasps drill into the underlying wood, which weakens the tree itself, and then the fungus causes decomposition within that space where they've created holes. And that's really important for the wood wasps larvae. So
Okay.
that starts to decompose the area so that when the larvae hatch, they've got something to eat and they've got
Interesting.
this wood that's been softened and slightly decomposed in order to thrive and survive.
That's interesting. That reminds me of woodpeckers and how they create like a very small hole in a tree and then they leave it up to the fungus and the insects to make it basically turn it into a home for them later and they come back 2 years later and live there. Yeah. It's like
Wow,
they
that's
start
so
the
cool.
process and then the other things, they finish the process and create a home for them. I suppose it's a
That's
similar thing with bees.
amazing. Yes,
Mm,
exactly. That's so interesting. I love those parallels in nature where it's just so similar in the ways that they do things, but are completely different species or just different
yeah.
types of animals, which is just really interesting. So
Fascinating, isn't it?
completely fascinating. And so now with these Sirex Noctilio, once they've created these holes, often the trees will fight back by filling or blocking those holes with resin. And if they are able to do that and the eggs have already been laid, that then kills the larva. So the
Right.
larva have got no way of boring. They're not a boring insect, so they can't get out. So once that resin's there, they're done for.
Yeah. I think that's quite
Um,
a typical tree response, isn't it, to anything that
yes.
bores in general? Because I definitely read that with the moths and with
Hmm.
the beetles.
Yes. Yes.
So
Yeah. So that is, I think, the tree's almost first response to try
mhm,
and protect themselves. So now you were talking earlier about how the US stopped importing any trees from Europe, and so these insects are also a big problem going into the States. And so in order for wood to be imported, they need a certification to say they are free from larvae. And so I'm sure that that is not only for the midnight wood wasp, but also for a variety of other
many things. Yeah.
larvae. Yeah, and I've realized, Hattie, I've gone this whole time talking, but I've not told you what they look like. So the males and females look a little bit different, but they've got these cylindrical bodies with a very long and pointed abdomen, and long black bristle-shaped antennae, which are very close together. Your male, it has an orange middle, and now often as females, we get shunned by the natural world. We get the worst looking options here, but I'm going to tell you, this female, she is the most beautiful female. Okay, she is steel blue
Wow.
with a hidden ovipositor. So she is this gorgeous steel blue color, and I just think she is insanely beautiful. She's gorgeous. She really is. I think often we don't get we get the short end of the stick, but I think she got it good.
It's good to hear.
Yes, it is. Then, Hattie, the last one that I really wanted to tell you about is the Deodar Weevil,
Okay.
or the Eastern Pine Weevil. Now,
Okay.
I don't know if you've come across it, but I just think weevils are really interesting. And so I was like, I
Yeah.
have to cover one.
The
Um,
name Weevil always gives me the creepy crawlies because I think about those weevils that you get in your cereal.
okay, this one is not like that. This one is
Bad.
cute. So it's got this
Right.
beautiful long snout. It's like this rusty red, but can go towards a grayish brown color. What's very distinctive about these weevils is towards their rear, they've got these two white spots. And at the top, near where their wings would open, they've also got like a whitish spot there. They're really interesting and quite cute to look at. They are native to North America, discovered in South Africa in 1942. I don't know if they've made their way over to the UK, but they also feed on a variety of conifers. They don't often go for healthy trees. They're more likely to go for your trees that are already being attacked, maybe too old or dying. Those are the trees you're most likely going to find these weevils on.
Yeah, and I
Um,
guess their defenses are going to be weaker. So makes
makes
an
it
easier
easier.
home for them, doesn't it?
Definitely. While they're feeding in the bark layer, they are making little holes, and in those holes, that's where the female lays her eggs. So they're still within that top layer. But they are a borer, and so their larvae bore under the bark once they hatch, where they feed, molt, and grow. The weevils tend to infest the bottom 10 feet of the main tree stem, but they have killed trees up to 36 feet tall.
Wow,
So
that's
they,
huge.
I suppose, because they're focusing on that bottom, right? If you don't have a strong foundation, it doesn't matter how tall you are, you're falling over, right? And so that's kind of where they're able to take down really big trees, because they're focusing on that bottom area. It's not the adults that are really causing any damage to the trees. They're just feeding on that bark layer. The damage comes from the eggs and the larvae after they've hatched, because that's where they start boring into the tree and causing problems. And they only have one generation a year, which I can't remember what else I researched, but something had like 8.
My word.
Yeah. So the spruce spider mite has 7 to 10 generations a year.
That's crazy.
That is a lot of babies, causing a lot of damage.
Yeah, it is. Gosh, those poor trees.
I know. But luckily with our weevil, there's only one generation a year. But they're also associated, and I don't know if you've ever heard of this fungus, Hattie, but the pitch canker fungus.
Okay. No, I haven't.
Um, okay, so I hadn't either, but it's a quite a serious disease that causes resin bleeding, and cankers to form on the trees, and then
Okay.
also causes needle dieback.
Right, okay.
So while the adults don't necessarily cause a lot of damage, the larvae do, but then so does this fungus that they're associated with.
Yeah, so they're spreading that fungus in.
Yeah. The other thing that I thought was quite interesting about them is that most insects are more active in the summer months, the warmer months, but these weevils are more active in the winter months.
Right.
So that was quite
Interesting, because it's
yeah.
colder.
I suppose once you're inside a tree, it doesn't really matter what month it is.
I wonder if it's warm inside a tree.
I don't know. I would think so, but then I suppose maybe not. This is a weird thing to be thinking about.
Yeah. You know, like in those movies where you get taken down into an anthill and you see
Yes,
what it's like to live there. If they ever make a movie about one of these boring insects, and by
yes,
boring I mean something that makes
yes,
holes, not
it
something that's
bores.
boring.
I know, I've been thinking about that every time I've said it's a boring insect.
It's actually very interesting,
Mm,
just makes holes in, in the wood. But if they made a film about that, or if we ended up in some kind of alternate universe where we got turned into something very small and we could go and investigate these things, then maybe we'll find out.
we just need to call Miss Frizzle and get on her school bus.
Go
Magic
on an
school bus, where are
adventure
we going today? Inside a tree.
inside
I,
a
I would
tree
watch that episode.
into a tunnel that's been made by one of these insects.
Exactly. Sounds like a good episode.
Yeah, I think we should create that.
We'll call the people up.
Yeah. Send them a script.
Exactly.
Has Ollie brought you any understories of the week this week?
Sort of. So we went on a bit of an adventure this week to an area that I think I'm going to use for my projects that I have to do. And he was just living his best life. He was I can't
He's so cute.
he was living his best life. He was pulling me all over the place, sniffing out all these new smells. There were a couple of like rivers and ponds, and he just jumped straight in. Such cute photos of him just exploring and loving and enjoying. He was great help to get up all the hills,
Oh yeah, I bet.
but then quite tough to get down the hills because he kind of just wants to go. And I wasn't necessarily in the best foot attire. I'd never been there before. I wasn't sure what to expect. I was just in my normal trainers. They've got these big rocks, but there's like gaps in between them. And so he would like quite easily have run down the hill, no problem. Here comes me waddling down behind him. He was very good. And then another amazing thing happened. We were on our walk this weekend. I think it was Saturday. As we were walking, I could hear these beautiful bird sounds that where I was looking around, I was like, where are you? Where are you coming from? I couldn't quite figure it out. Anyway, kept walking. All of a sudden, something flies down and lands in one of the trees right in front of us. Hattie, in my area, I saw two hornbills. Grey hornbills. So they're not as
Really?
bright and beautiful as Zazu, but they are these
Still, they're
gorgeous
magnificent,
grey
aren't they?
hornbills. They are so beautiful. And so one of them was in the tree, and it was crazy how easily it blended in. Um,
Wow.
it completely blended into the trees. They were eating the berries off of one of the trees. And then I was able to identify through the colors of their beak because the male, and now I can't remember which way around it is. One of them has a like very gray, like normal blackish beak, and the other one has got like this white piece on top and like a very red like tip to the beak. And
Okay.
so I was able to see that there was a male and a female in the different pictures.
That's so cool.
No,
What an experience. Oh
oh, it
my
was
gosh.
so cool. It was really, really special. So yeah,
Gosh, this world is magical. So exciting.
completely. Have your dogs given you any understories of the week?
Maybe one for next week because it's quite long
It is.
and I haven't quite recovered from it yet.
Well, that's totally okay. But if anybody else wants to share with us an understory of the week, please feel free to pop us a message. We would love to read your understories of the week along with ours.
Yeah, and if
Um,
you've got any pests or any animals that maybe you think that they deserve a little bit of a positive limelight or something, then please send those in. Send us pictures, send us
yeah,
videos, send us stories, everything. We're interested.
we'd love to see what you're up to.
Yes, we would.
Cassie, I think we've come to the end of today's journey, which is both sad but also exciting because it means we get to go on and research some more new things and come back next week and
Exactly.
share with everyone again.
Yeah. So thank you everyone for coming along for the
Yeah,
journey. It's been a fun
exciting.
one.
It has been a fun one, a very interesting one, and very different in terms of what we've covered. Thank you all for joining us on today's adventure. We hope that you have enjoyed hearing what we've been up to in nature, and we are looking forward to hearing what you've been up to. If you would like to get in contact with us on Instagram, we are understory_learning, and you can also pop us an email at understorylearning@gmail.com. We would love to hear any stories that you've got, but also if you've got anything you want us to talk about, or any interesting pests, pines, trees, weeds, anything that you find interesting that you would love to share with us, we would love to hear from you. Until next time, have fun exploring,
Have
and we'll see
fun.
you soon.
Bye.
Bye.